Before we begin, if you believe in justice and second chances, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss what happens next. And if this story resonates with you, drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Eliza's shoes. Some betrayals arrive like lightning, sudden, violent, unmistakable. But others creep into your life slowly, like poison dripping into a glass of wine. You don't taste it at first. You don't feel it. Until one day, you realize you've been dying all along. This is the story of Eliza Sterling, a woman who discovered that the cost of trust can be measured in restaurant receipts, stolen glances, and lies whispered in the dark. But more importantly, this is the story of how she made everyone pay that cost back. With interest, what would you do if you discovered your spouse wasn't just cheating, but actively erasing you from their life, planning to replace you publicly while you stayed home? Oblivious and humiliated, Eliza Sterling found out, and what she did next shocked an entire city. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to a morning that seemed perfect on the surface, but was already rotten underneath. The morning sun of New York City filtered through silk curtains worth more than most people's monthly salary. It painted golden streaks across Italian marble that reflected light like frozen water. Everything in the Sterling mansion screamed perfection. Everything except the marriage that lived inside it. Eliza Sterling stood in her kitchen, arranging white roses in a crystal vase. Her hands moved with practiced elegance, each stem placed with the precision of someone who had learned to find peace in small rituals. At 32 years old, she was the kind of beautiful that turned heads without trying. Rich brown hair that caught the light, green eyes that seemed to hold secrets, a smile that could warm a room, even when her heart was freezing inside. But that morning, her smile was genuine, because her 5-year-old daughter Sophie had just walked into the room. "Mommy, can I help?" Those 4 words, that sweet, innocent voice. It was the only thing keeping Eliza's world from completely shattering. Sophie was her mirror image. Same green eyes, same gentle spirit, the same hope that the world could be kind if you were kind first. "Of course, my princess. Which flowers do you think look best here?" Sophie studied each bloom with the serious concentration only children possess. Her blonde curls bounced as she nodded thoughtfully, completely absorbed in this sacred task her mother had shared with her. This was happiness. This was love. This was real. And then Adrian Sterling entered the room, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. At 38, Adrian Sterling was what magazines called a self-made success story. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in Italian suits that cost more than some cars, black hair perfectly styled, that confident smile that had won him boardrooms, investors, and once upon a time, Eliza's heart. He was the CEO of Sterling and Associates, one of the largest business consultancies in North America. His rise had been meteoric, from modest beginnings to controlling millions in contracts, from nobody to somebody, from kind to cruel. "Morning," he muttered, his eyes never leaving his phone screen. Not "good morning, beautiful." Not "how did you sleep?" Not even eye contact. Just "morning," tossed over his shoulder like spare change to a beggar. "Daddy!" Sophie ran toward him, arms outstretched, her entire face lit up with joy. Adrian's hug was mechanical, perfunctory, the kind of hug you give when someone's watching and you need to appear normal. His thumb kept scrolling. His attention was somewhere else. Someone else. "Hi, sweetie. Daddy's busy now." 5 words that crushed a little girl's morning. Eliza watched Sophie's bright eyes dim slightly, watched her daughter learn, once again, that she wasn't important enough to deserve her father's attention. How many times had Eliza watched this scene play out? How many times had she made excuses for him? He's under stress. The business is demanding. He's providing for us. He loves us. He just doesn't know how to show it anymore. Lies. All lies. And she was starting to realize it. "Adrian." Eliza kept her voice soft, controlled. Years of marriage had taught her that emotion only made him colder. "It's Saturday. I thought maybe we could spend the day together. Take Sophie to the park, or—" Impossible. He cut her off without looking up, without even the courtesy of pretending to consider it. "I need to review the presentation for the merger with the Rio de Janeiro hotel group. If we secure this contract, we're expanding across all of Brazil." Finally, he looked at her, but there was no warmth in those eyes, no recognition of the woman he'd promised to love forever. Just a cold assessment, as if she were an employee who'd made an unreasonable request. "Some things are more important than park strolls, Eliza. I hope you understand that." The words landed like slaps. Each one is precise, each one designed to remind her of her place. Wife, mother, irrelevant. But Eliza had learned to wear her mask well. She smiled, not the real smile she'd given Sophie, the other one, the one that kept peace, the one that cost her a piece of her soul every time she used it. "Of course, Sophie and I will find something to do." Adrian nodded absently, already typing another message. And it was the way his fingers moved, the subtle smile that ghosted across his face as he typed, that made Eliza's stomach clench with a suspicion she'd been fighting for months. His phone rang. He answered immediately, his voice transforming into something warm, engaging, alive. The voice he used to use with her. "Maya, my dear." Maya. That name has been appearing with increasing frequency lately, always described as a promising executive or a talented consultant, but there was something in the way Adrian said it, a subtle intimacy, a tenderness that no longer existed when he spoke to his wife. "Of course we can move up our meeting." He walked toward his office, phone pressed to his ear, and Eliza heard fragments of conversation drifting back. Words like, "get together," and "reservation for two," and "I can't wait." Each phrase was another crack in the foundation of her marriage, another piece of evidence in a case she didn't want to build. "Mommy, is Daddy going to play with us?" Sophie's question pulled her back. That sweet, hopeful voice, that face that still believed in happy families and fathers who kept promises. Eliza crouched down, taking her daughter's small hands in hers. "Not today, my love. But you know what? We're going to have a special day. Just us. We'll go to the Tribeca Art Museum, and then get ice cream at that shop you love." Sophie's eyes lit up again. Children are resilient like that. They bounce back from disappointment with a speed that adults can only envy. Or perhaps it's not resilience at all. Perhaps it's just that they haven't learned yet how much disappointment they're supposed to carry. As they prepared to leave, Eliza heard more of Adrian's conversation. His voice had that particular quality now, that warmth, that engagement, that presence he no longer offered his family. And in that moment, standing in her beautiful home with her beautiful daughter, Eliza Sterling realized something that would change everything. She was already alone. She'd been alone for months. She just hadn't admitted it yet. The question wasn't whether her marriage was over. The question was what she was going to do about it. But she didn't know yet. Not yet. That revelation would come soon enough, in the form of a small piece of paper, a receipt, and the end of every lie she'd been telling herself. Before we continue, I need to know. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Like you're performing a role but nobody's watching? Drop a comment and let me know. Because what happens next, you need to understand what drove Eliza to do it. The week continued exactly as you'd expect in the Sterling household. Adrian left earlier, returned later. Each day brought more elaborate excuses about market analysis and expansion strategies that demanded his constant attention. Eliza had become fluent in the language of affairs without even realizing it. The phone guarded like a precious artifact, the secret smiles while texting, the cologne that wasn't his, the shirts that smelled like perfume she'd never worn. All the clichés were there, playing out exactly as they did in every story of betrayal. But knowing something and proving it are two different things, and proof was about to arrive in the most mundane way possible. It was Thursday. One of those rainy October days when the city feels gray and heavy, when the wet streets reflect the gray sky and everything feels like it's drowning. Sophie had an after-school activity, which meant Eliza had a rare afternoon alone. She decided to organize the closet. It was one of those tasks she'd been putting off, and idle hands needed occupation before her mind started spiraling into dark places. Adrian's side of the closet was immaculate as always. Suits organized by color, shirts pressed and perfect, shoes shined to a mirror finish. Everything reflecting the image of control he projected to the world. She pulled out a charcoal gray suit that needed to go to the dry cleaner. Years of marriage had taught her to check pockets first. You'd be surprised what men forget in their pockets. Business cards, receipts, loose change, the small debris of their daily lives. Her fingers touched paper. Something about it made her heart start racing before she even looked. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was all those months of suspicion crystallizing into certainty. Maybe she already knew what she'd find. She pulled out a small, folded receipt. For a moment, she just stared at it. Her hands were shaking slightly. This was the moment that would change everything. Once she unfolded this paper, she couldn't unknow what it told her. She unfolded it. Le Bernardin, one of the most exclusive, romantic restaurants in Manhattan. The kind of place you don't go for business meetings. The kind of place you go when you want to impress someone, seduce someone, celebrate with someone special. The receipt showed dinner for two, a bottle of Dom Perignon, oysters, lobster, chocolate soufflé for two. The total made her stomach turn, but it wasn't the money that destroyed her. It was the date. 2 days ago, Tuesday, the day Adrian had texted her saying he'd be at the office until midnight preparing reports for Brazil investors. The day he'd come home at 12:30 a.m. claiming to be too exhausted to eat. He'd been at Le Bernardin with someone else, eating oysters and drinking champagne and sharing chocolate soufflé while she'd waited at home, pretending to believe his lies. Eliza sat down heavily on the closet bench, the receipt still in her trembling hands. All the suspicions, all the signals, all the little moments she'd rationalized away. They crystallized into one undeniable, devastating truth. Her husband was having an affair. The rain outside intensified, hammering against the windows like the universe was crying for her. Or maybe it was mocking her. Look at the fool who didn't see what was right in front of her face. She didn't cry. That surprised her. She thought she'd cry, but instead she felt oddly calm, hollow, like something inside her had simply turned off. The part that hoped, the part that believed, the part that loved Adrian Sterling. That part was dead now. Her phone rang, pulling her back from the void. Julian Hayes, Adrian's business partner, one of her last real friends. "Eliza, my dear, how are you?" His voice was warm, concerned. Julian had always been kind to her. Even when Adrian started treating her like furniture, Julian maintained his respect, his courtesy, his genuine care. "Julian," her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Do you have a few minutes? I need to talk to someone." There was a pause. She heard him moving, a door closing. "Always. I'll be there in 40 minutes. He arrived 35 minutes later, which told her everything about how seriously he took her call. She met him in the living room, serving coffee with hands that had stopped shaking but felt numb, disconnected from her body. Julian Hayes was 52, with kind brown eyes and silver-streaked hair. He'd been Adrian's partner for over a decade, watching the company grow from a small consultancy to an empire. But more importantly, he'd been a friend, a real one. They sat in silence for a moment. Eliza holding her coffee cup like it was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and uncertain. "Julian," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long have we been friends?" "More than 10 years, since before your marriage." "Then you know I've never asked you to betray Adrian's confidence." Julian nodded slowly. His face was already heavy with sorrow, as if he knew what was coming. "You don't need to ask me anything, Eliza. I can see it in your face. You know." She showed him the receipt. Julian closed his eyes like he was in physical pain. When he opened them again, there were actual tears forming. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "God, Eliza, I'm so sorry." "Tell me," she said. "Not a request, a demand. Tell me everything." Julian set down his coffee cup. His hands were shaking slightly. "Her name is Maya Durant. She's 27, a marketing consultant who started working with us about 6 months ago. 27, the same age Eliza had been when she married Adrian. The cruel symmetry of it was not lost on her. How long has the affair been going on? 5 months, maybe a little longer." Julian's voice was thick with regret. "Eliza, I tried to talk to him, multiple times. I told him he was destroying his family, risking everything." "And what did he say?" Julian looked at her, pain evident in his eyes. "He said I was old-fashioned, that I didn't understand modern relationships." He paused, clearly struggling with whether to continue. "He said you were content being a trophy wife." That Maya challenged him intellectually. The words hit harder than she'd expected. Trophy wife. As if the 7 years she dedicated to building a home, raising their daughter, supporting his career, meant nothing. As if she'd chosen to be decorative, rather than being systematically excluded from his life. "Tell me the rest," Eliza said. Her voice was steel now. "All of it." Julian stood, walking to the window. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with anger directed at his partner. "There's an event next week. The Manhattan Business Council's annual gala at the Plaza Hotel. Adrian is planning to attend with Maya as his official escort. He's been telling people she's his new strategic partner, that she's responsible for international expansion." Eliza felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart breaking. That had already happened. This was something else. This was her patience, her tolerance, her willingness to be invisible finally shattering. "And me?" she asked. "What excuse has he given for my absence?" "He said you prefer to handle personal family matters, that you like to keep your private life separate from business." So he was erasing her. Not just cheating on her, not just lying to her. He was actively removing her from his public life, replacing her with a younger model, while expecting her to stay home and accept it. "Julian." Eliza's voice was quiet, but there was something new in it, something dangerous. "Is there anything else I should know?" Julian turned back to face her. There was a war happening behind his eyes. Loyalty to his partner versus loyalty to what was right. "Maya isn't just his mistress, Eliza. She's been charging unauthorized commissions from clients, skimming money from contracts. I have evidence of financial irregularities that could destroy both of them if it came to light." Eliza absorbed this information, her mind already working, already planning. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're my friend, because what Adrian is doing is not just wrong, it's cruel, and because I think you deserve to have all the information before you decide what to do next." He paused, then added softly, "And because I think the Eliza I knew in college, the strong, brilliant woman who wouldn't take disrespect from anyone, that woman is still in there. And I think she's about to remind everyone who she is." After Julian left, Eliza sat alone in the living room as afternoon faded into evening. The receipt was still in her hand, but it felt different now, not like evidence of her husband's betrayal, like ammunition. She thought about Sophie, sleeping upstairs, innocent and trusting. She thought about the woman she used to be before marriage, taught her to make herself smaller, quieter, less. And she made a decision. Adrian Sterling wanted to humiliate her publicly, wanted to parade his mistress at the city's most prestigious event while his wife stayed home in shame. Fine, but he'd forgotten something important. He'd forgotten who she was, who she could be when pushed too far. And he was about to remember. Are you with Eliza so far? Do you think she should fight back or walk away quietly? Comment below, because what she does next is going to shock you. Have you ever watched someone decide to stop being a victim? It's not a gradual process. It's not a slow evolution. It's a switch that flips. One moment you're drowning, the next you remember you know how to swim. For Eliza Sterling, that switch flipped the moment Julian walked out her door. She stood and walked to the mirror in the hallway, really looked at herself for the first time in months. When had she started dressing for comfort instead of confidence? When had she stopped caring about her appearance beyond basic maintenance? When had she accepted being invisible? She pulled out her phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Isabel Vega. The name made Eliza smile for the first time since finding the receipt. Isabel had been her best friend in college. Wild, creative, utterly fearless. She'd gone on to become one of New York's most sought-after stylists, dressing celebrities and socialites for red carpets and magazine covers. Vega styling. Isabel, it's Eliza Sterling. There was a pause, then a shriek of delight that made Eliza pull the phone away from her ear. Eliza Sterling. Oh my God, it's been what, 5 years? How's married life? How's the CEO husband? Complicated, Eliza said, surprised at how steady her voice was. Which is why I'm calling. I need your help. Name it. The Manhattan Business Council Gala is next week. I need a dress. But not just any dress, Isabel. I need the kind of dress that stops conversations, the kind that makes people forget their own names, the kind that declares war. There was a loaded silence on the other end of the line. Isabel had always been perceptive. What kind of war are we talking about, darling? The scorched earth kind. Isabel's laugh was pure delight. I'll be at your house in an hour. And Eliza, I'm going to make you look like a goddess, the kind that destroys cities. True to her word, Isabel arrived 58 minutes later with 3 assistants and enough garment bags to outfit an entire movie premiere. She swept into the Sterling mansion like a force of nature, her silver hair cut in a dramatic bob, her outfit an explosion of artistic chaos that somehow worked perfectly. Let me look at you, she demanded, circling Eliza like a sculptor examining marble. Eliza stood still, letting her old friend assess her. You're thinner, Isabel noted. There's tension in your shoulders. But your eyes, darling, your eyes have this fire I've never seen before. That's good. That's very good. Can you work with it? Can I work with it? Honey, I'm going to make you unforgettable. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind. Isabel had brought 5 dresses, each one more spectacular than the last. The first was blood red, sleek and dangerous, with a slit that went to the thigh. For making a statement, Isabel explained. The second was midnight blue with crystal beading that caught light like stars. For commanding respect. The third was black with architectural lines that could have been carved from shadow. For intimidation. The fourth was champagne gold, soft and ethereal, for reminding them what they lost. But it was the 5th dress that made Eliza stop breathing. It was emerald green, deep, rich, the exact color of her eyes. The fabric seemed to shimmer with its own light, flowing like water. The cut was modern but timeless, sophisticated but devastating. The neckline was elegant, the fit was perfection, and the back was a work of art. A deep V that stopped just above dangerous territory. The emerald fabric draping in a way that was simultaneously modest and seductive. This one, Eliza whispered, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror wasn't the neglected wife who'd found a receipt in her husband's pocket. She was something else entirely. Something powerful. Something dangerous. Something that had been sleeping for too long. I knew you'd choose that one, Isabel said with satisfaction. It's the hardest to wear. It requires absolute confidence. But on you, it's going to be devastating. They spent the rest of the afternoon on details. Isabel insisted on booking her with her personal beauty team, the same people who prepared Oscar nominees and Met Gala attendees. Hair, makeup, the full transformation. Now, Isabel said, opening a bottle of wine and settling onto the sofa. Are you going to tell me what this is really about? Eliza considered for a moment, then decided on honesty. She told Isabel everything. The neglect, the affair, the plans to publicly replace her, the gala event where Adrian intended to parade his mistress while Eliza stayed home in humiliation. Isabel's face grew darker with each revelation. "What kind of man does that to a woman like you?" she said, when Eliza finished. "The kind who forgot I'm not just someone he married. I'm someone who can fight back." "Good." Isabel raised her wine glass. "Then let's give him a reminder he'll never forget." Over the next few days, Eliza underwent a transformation that was as much internal as external. Each morning, she went to the gym, not to fit into the dress, but to build strength. Physical strength that manifested as mental strength. She visited Isabel's team at their Manhattan studio. They treated her like a masterpiece being restored. Hair treatment to bring back the shine that stress had dulled. Skin treatments to erase the tiredness that months of anxiety had carved into her face. Not because she needed to look younger, but because she needed to look alive again. She practiced walking in her heels. Not the tentative, careful steps of someone afraid to take up space, but powerful, confident strides. The kind of walk that declared ownership of every room she entered. Meanwhile, Adrian was oblivious. He barely noticed her new routine, too busy with his phone, his meetings, his double life. He came home later each night, his excuses growing thinner, but his arrogance growing stronger. One evening, just 3 days before the gala, he actually suggested she attend with him. "Eliza," he said over dinner. They were sitting at opposite ends of their long dining table, miles apart in every way that mattered. "About the council gala. Maybe you should come after all." She looked at him calmly, her fork poised over her untouched meal. Why the sudden change of heart? He shifted uncomfortably. Had Julian said something? Had Maya gotten cold feet? Had someone questioned the appropriateness of bringing a strategic partner to an event where spouses were expected? "It might look better. For appearances." "Appearances," Eliza repeated softly. "How interesting that you're suddenly concerned about appearances. What's that supposed to mean?" She smiled. Not the submissive smile he knew. Something new. Something that made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite identify. "Nothing, Adrian. Don't worry. I'll be at the gala." "You will?" "Yes. I'm going as Julian's escort. He invited me days ago." The color drained from Adrian's face. She could see his mind racing, trying to figure out what Julian had told her, what she knew, how much danger he was in. "Julian invited you? He's a good friend. Unlike some people I know, he values loyalty." Adrian opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in months, he looked uncertain, vulnerable, like he was starting to realize he'd made a terrible miscalculation. "It's going to be an interesting evening," Eliza continued, standing gracefully. "I'm very much looking forward to it." She walked past him, and as she did, she let her hand trail across his shoulder, a gesture that was simultaneously intimate and threatening. "Sleep well, Adrian. You're going to need your strength." That night, alone in their bed while Adrian worked late in his office, probably texting Maya, probably trying to figure out how to manage the situation he'd created, Eliza stared at the ceiling. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. She was calm, focused, ready. 7 years of being diminished. 7 years of being taken for granted. 7 years of being treated like beautiful wallpaper. It all ended in 3 days. And when she walked into that ballroom, everyone would remember that Eliza Sterling wasn't just a trophy wife. She was the whole damn prize. And Adrian had just thrown her away. Comment below. What would you wear to an event where you're about to destroy your cheating spouse's reputation? I want to hear your war dress ideas. The night of the Manhattan Business Council Gala arrived with the weight of inevitability. The Plaza Hotel stood against the October sky like a golden temple, its lights reflecting off the rain-slicked streets. Luxury cars formed a glittering procession, delivering New York's elite to the red carpet that ran up the iconic front steps. This was the event of the season. CEOs, Politicians, media moguls, old money and new money, all mixing in that peculiarly New York way where power was the only currency that mattered. Adrian Sterling arrived at 8 sharp, stepping out of his black Mercedes with Maya Durant on his arm. He looked impeccable, custom Armani tuxedo that probably cost more than some people's cars, hair perfectly styled, that confident smile he'd mastered over years of convincing people to trust him with millions. But there was tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes, because Julian's warning still echoed in his mind, and Eliza's promise hung over him like a sword. Maya Durant was exactly what you'd expect. 27 years old with that fresh-faced beauty that comes from youth, expensive skincare, and never having experienced real hardship. Blonde hair in an intricate updo, a gold dress that caught every camera flash, shimmering like she'd been dipped in liquid metal. She looked beautiful, and she knew it. Her smile was confident, calculated, designed for maximum impact. "You're nervous," she observed as they walked the red carpet, pausing for photographers. "Just focused," Adrian replied, his hand tightening on her arm. "Adrian, darling." Her voice dropped, became more intimate. "Remember what this is about. We're introducing me as your strategic partner, building my profile. This is about our future, not his family, not his marriage, not his daughter, just our future." As if the last 7 years of his life could be erased with champagne and ambition. "I know," he said, but something cold was settling in his stomach. The plaza's grand ballroom was magnificent, crystal chandeliers that had witnessed a century of New York's most important moments, white and gold flower arrangements that perfumed the air with elegance, tables set with precision, each one a small work of art. The room filled quickly with the city's power players. Adrian and Maya were immediately surrounded. Eduardo Sierra, the council president, approached with that politician's smile that promised everything and revealed nothing. "Adrian, good to see you." They shook hands. Eduardo's eyes slid to Maya with calculated interest. "And this must be the famous Maya Durant I've heard so much about." "Eduardo, always a pleasure." Adrian launched into his prepared speech. "Yes, Maya is our new director of international expansion. She's been instrumental in the Brazil negotiations." "Fascinating," Eduardo said. His tone was polite, but his eyes carried questions. Everyone knew Adrian was married. Everyone knew this wasn't his wife. And everyone was wondering what game was being played. "And Mrs. Sterling?" Eduardo asked, casually dropping the bomb. "I haven't seen her at these events lately." Adrian felt his collar tighten. "Eliza prefers to focus on family matters. You know how it is." "Of course," Eduardo nodded, but there was something knowing in his smile, something that made Adrian's paranoia spike. The evening continued. Conversations. Networking. The orchestra playing background music to a symphony of deals and power plays. Adrian introduced Maya to investors, to potential clients, to everyone who mattered. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was about to happen, that he'd miscalculated something crucial. It was 8:45 when the atmosphere in the room began to change. Conversation started to fade like someone was slowly turning down the volume on the entire ballroom. Heads turned toward the entrance. Whispers spread like wildfire through dried grass. Adrian was in the middle of a conversation with a group of Brazilian investors when he felt it. That primitive instinct that tells you when a predator enters the room. He turned toward the entrance and saw his wife. Eliza Sterling stood at the top of the marble staircase that descended into the ballroom, and time seemed to stop. The emerald dress flowed around her like liquid light, catching the chandelier's glow and reflecting it back tenfold. Her brown hair fell in soft waves over bare shoulders. Her posture was that of royalty. Shoulders back, chin up. Those green eyes that matched her dress scanning the room with calm confidence. But it wasn't just her beauty that stopped everyone cold. It was her presence, the sheer force of personality that radiated from her like heat from a star. This was not a woman who could be ignored. This was not a woman who would accept being erased. This was a woman who commanded attention simply by existing. The room fell silent. 200 of New York's most powerful people stopped mid-conversation to watch this stunning woman descend the stairs. "My God," someone whispered near the entrance. "Who is that?" "That's Eliza Sterling," came the hushed response. "Adrian Sterling's wife." "That's his wife? I didn't even know he was married." "Oh, he's married. He just forgot to mention it lately." Eliza descended slowly, each step measured, graceful, devastating. She wasn't rushing. She didn't need to. She owned this moment completely. Maya turned to see what had caused the room-wide reaction and felt her stomach drop. This was not what she'd expected. She'd seen photos of Eliza Sterling, society page images from years ago. A pretty woman, sure, but bland, forgettable. The kind of woman who faded into the background at events like this. The woman descending those stairs was none of those things. "Adrian," Maya's voice was tight. "That's her, isn't it?" Adrian couldn't speak. He was frozen, watching his wife move through the room like a queen reclaiming her throne. She was transformed, not just in appearance, but in essence. This was not the woman he'd left at home. This was not the woman he'd taken for granted. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous. Eliza reached the bottom of the stairs, and Julian Hayes materialized at her side, offering his arm. He looked distinguished in his tuxedo, but more importantly, he looked protective, proud, like he was escorting someone precious. Together, they moved through the parting crowd toward where Adrian and Maya stood frozen. The entire ballroom watched. This was better than any planned entertainment. This was real drama unfolding in real time. When Eliza reached them, she smiled. Warm, genuine, absolutely terrifying. "Adrian," her voice carried perfectly in the hushed room. "What a surprise to see you here." She turned to Maya, and her green eyes assessed the younger woman with the calm precision of a surgeon choosing where to cut. "And you must be Maya Durant. I've heard so much about you." Maya tried to summon her confident smile, the one that had served her so well in boardrooms and business meetings. But something about Eliza's gaze made her feel like a child being evaluated by an adult, like she was being seen through completely. "I'm Maya," she managed. "I work with Adrian on international expansion." "How fascinating." Eliza's tone remained perfectly cordial. International expansion. Adrian always did have such a passion for new territories. The double meaning landed like a grenade. Several people in earshot exchanged glances. Someone smothered a laugh. "Eliza," Adrian finally found his voice, though it came out hoarse. "What are you doing here?" She tilted her head slightly, as if genuinely confused by the question. "I'm here as Julian's escort, naturally. I hope you don't mind." She paused, letting the implications settle. "After all, I am still a Sterling. For now." Those last two words hung in the air like a threat. Eduardo Sierra appeared, drawn by the drama like a shark to blood in the water. "Eliza, how wonderful to see you. You look absolutely magnificent. It's been far too long." "Thank you, Eduardo." Her smile was genuine now. "It has been too long. I realized I was missing so many interesting conversations by staying home." "Well, we're delighted to have you back." Eduardo glanced meaningfully at Adrian. The whole Sterling family present. How perfect. The orchestra began playing a waltz, and Julian smoothly offered his hand. "Eliza, would you care to dance?" "I'd love to." She took his hand without even glancing at Adrian, and they moved to the dance floor. Every eye in the room followed them. Adrian stood rooted, watching his wife glide across the floor in another man's arms. She was radiant, confident, captivating, everything he'd forgotten she could be. "Adrian, darling," Maya's voice was sharp with panic. "Maybe we should leave." But he couldn't move. He was transfixed by the woman he'd married, the woman he'd betrayed, the woman who was now showing him exactly what he'd thrown away. And somewhere, deep in his gut, he knew this was just the beginning. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what Eliza should say to Maya. Because trust me, what happens next is brutal. The waltz ended, but Eliza and Julian remained on the dance floor for a few extra moments, their conversation intimate, their body language suggesting years of trust and friendship, which, of course, they had. "Are you ready?" Julian asked softly. "I've been ready for months," Eliza replied. "I just didn't know it. You don't have to do this publicly. We can handle it through lawyers, quietly." Quietly? Eliza's eyes flashed. Julian. He was planning to humiliate me publicly, to erase me while I stayed home like a good little wife. No. If this ends, it ends on my terms, publicly. Julian nodded. He'd expected no less. They returned to the social area where Adrian stood with Maya, both looking increasingly uncomfortable. The Brazilian investors had moved away, and several other groups were keeping a careful distance. Everyone could sense something was building. Everyone wanted a front-row seat. Adrian. Eliza approached them again, her emerald dress catching the light like armor. "Could we speak privately?" It wasn't a request. It was a command. Adrian nodded stiffly. "Of course." They moved toward one of the plaza's side terraces, an elegant space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The October night was crisp, the city lights creating a dazzling backdrop. Maya started to follow, but Eliza stopped her with a single look. "This is between a husband and wife, Miss Durant. I'm sure you understand." Maya froze, recognizing the steel beneath the polite words. She watched them walk away, her gold dress suddenly feeling like fool's gold. Cheap, obvious, wrong. On the terrace, away from the crowd but not entirely private, several other guests were getting air or having their own quiet conversations. Eliza had chosen this location deliberately, public enough to be witnessed, private enough to be devastating. "What are you doing, Eliza?" Adrian demanded, his composure finally cracking. "This transformation, showing up with Julian, publicly embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you?" Eliza's laugh was cold. "Adrian, you brought your mistress to a public event and introduced her as your business partner. You've been lying to me for 5 months. You were planning to divorce me after your Brazil deal closed. Who exactly is embarrassing whom?" Adrian's face went white. How do I know?" Eliza stepped closer. "I know about Le Bernardin. I know about the restaurant receipt in your suit pocket. I know about Maya's age. 27. Adrian. The same age I was when we got married. I know about the affair. All 5 months of it. I can explain." "You don't need to," she interrupted, her voice deadly calm. "In fact, I should thank you. You did me a tremendous favor." "What?" "You showed me who you really are." Imagine if I'd wasted another 10 years trying to be the perfect wife for a man who doesn't deserve a single day of my dedication. You freed me, Adrian, by being exactly who you are. The words hit him like physical blows, because somewhere deep down, beneath the ego and the justifications, he knew she was right. "And Sophie?" he asked, grasping for leverage. "You're going to destroy our daughter's family for revenge?" Eliza's eyes flashed dangerously. "Don't you dare use our daughter as a shield for your behavior. Sophie will be fine. She has a mother who loves her unconditionally and will fight for her. As for her father..." She paused significantly. "That depends entirely on your next decisions." "What do you mean?" "I mean you have 2 options, Adrian. 2 paths forward, and you choose right now." She moved to the terrace railing, looking out at Central Park, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Option 1. We do this civilly. You agree to a fair division of assets. We establish a custody arrangement that prioritizes Sophie's well-being. You maintain your dignity, I maintain mine, and we move forward as mature adults." She turned back to face him. "Or option 2. Julian shares some very interesting information with the council's board of directors. Information about financial irregularities in your Brazil contracts. Unauthorized commissions, money flowing into private accounts, the kind of information that could end careers and start federal investigations. Adrian felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Eliza's smile was razor-sharp. "Julian has documentation, Adrian. Spreadsheets, bank transfers, emails from Maya Durant arranging payments that bypass company accounting. Did you really think no one would notice? You wouldn't do that. It would destroy everything we built." "Everything you built," she corrected, "while I stayed home being your trophy wife, remember? But you're right. I don't want to destroy the company. I don't want to hurt innocent employees. I just want you to understand something very clearly." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. "I am not weak. I am not disposable. I am not someone you can discard without consequences. You forgot that, Adrian. You forgot who you married." It was at that moment that Maya appeared in the terrace doorway, clearly unable to stay away, her face tight with anxiety. "Adrian, darling, people are asking questions." "Perfect timing." Eliza turned toward her. "Miss Durant, I've been wanting to speak with you." Maya tried to summon her confidence, that calculated poise she'd perfected. But standing in front of Eliza Sterling in her emerald dress, with her quiet power and devastating presence, Maya suddenly felt very young, very foolish. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," Maya said, trying to sound dismissive. "Oh, but we do." Eliza circled her slowly, like a predator examining prey. "You see, I've learned so much about you in the past few days. 27 years old, ambitious, talented with numbers, particularly when those numbers need to be creative." Maya's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about. The Brazil contracts, Miss Durant, the private commissions, the money that's been flowing into an account registered to an LLC you created 6 months ago. The same 6 months you've been working with Sterling and Associates. That's business strategy. That's embezzlement," Eliza said softly. "That's fraud. That's 5 to 10 years in federal prison." Maya looked at Adrian, panic replacing all her calculated confidence. "Adrian, tell her it's legitimate. Tell her." But Adrian said nothing, because he was finally seeing Maya clearly, not as the exciting, intellectually challenging partner he'd convinced himself she was, but as exactly what Eliza had called her, an opportunist. Someone who'd seen his position, his access, his resources, and decided to exploit them. "You don't love him," Eliza said, and there was almost pity in her voice now. "You love what he represents, the power, the money, the access. But Adrian himself? I doubt you even know him." Maya started, but no words came. "Let me tell you something about the man you're so eager to replace me with," Eliza continued. "He's brilliant in business, yes. He's charming when he wants to be, but he's also someone who will discard you the moment you stop serving his purposes, just like he tried to discard me." She turned back to Adrian. "The difference is, I built a life with him. I gave him 7 years. I gave him a daughter. I gave him my trust and my love and my loyalty. What did you give him, Miss Durant? Besides stolen money and the thrill of forbidden fruit?" Maya's mask finally shattered completely. Tears began streaming down her carefully made-up face, and she looked suddenly very much like the 27-year-old she was, young, scared, caught. "I think you should leave," Eliza said, not unkindly, "before this becomes even more embarrassing for you." Maya looked at Adrian one last time, waiting for him to defend her, to protect her, to choose her. He said nothing. With a choked sob, Maya turned and fled the terrace, her gold dress catching the light one last time before she disappeared into the crowd. The silence stretched between Adrian and Eliza. 7 years of marriage, 5 months of betrayal, and now, the end. "What now?" Adrian asked finally, his voice defeated. "Now you choose," Eliza replied. "Dignity or destruction, cooperation or war. What's it going to be, Adrian. He looked at the woman in front of him, his wife, the mother of his child, the woman he'd sworn to love and protect, and he saw, truly saw, what he'd lost. Not just a beautiful woman, not just a trophy wife, but someone extraordinary, someone strong, someone who had loved him completely and whom he'd repaid with lies and betrayal. "I'll agree to your terms," he said quietly. "Fair division, shared custody, dignity." "Good choice." Eliza turned to leave, but paused at the terrace entrance. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that might have been sadness beneath the steel. "You know what the truly tragic part is, Adrian. I would have loved you forever, if you'd just treated me like a partner instead of an accessory, if you'd seen me instead of looking through me, if you'd remembered that I chose you when you were nobody and stayed with you while you became somebody." She looked back at him one last time. "But you forgot. You forgot that the woman strong enough to build you up was also strong enough to tear you down. You forgot that I wasn't something you owned. I was someone who chose to love you. Eliza, the next time you choose a woman, Adrian, make sure she loves you for who you are, not what you have. You deserve that, and so does she." And with those final words, Eliza Sterling walked back into the ballroom, her emerald dress flowing behind her like a cape, like armor, like the costume of a woman who had just reclaimed her power. The room fell silent again as she entered. Every eye was on her. Everyone had seen the drama unfold. Everyone knew that something seismic had just happened. Julian appeared at her side immediately. "How do you feel?" "Free," Eliza said simply. "For the first time in 5 months, I feel free." Eduardo Sierra approached, and this time his politician's smile was genuine. "Mrs. Sterling, I hope everything is all right?" "Everything is perfect, Eduardo, and it's going to be even better." She smiled at him. "You know, I've been thinking. I used to do consulting work before I got married. Corporate strategy, market analysis. I was quite good at it. I'm sure you were. I think it's time I got back into it. After all, I'm going to have quite a bit of free time soon, and Sterling and Associates might benefit from some fresh perspective. Someone who knows the company intimately but isn't afraid to challenge the status quo." Eduardo's eyes lit up with understanding and approval. "I think that sounds like an excellent idea, Mrs. Sterling. In fact, I know several firms that would be very interested in your expertise." Julian squeezed her hand. "You're not just surviving this, are you?" "No," Eliza replied, her green eyes shining with determination. "I'm winning." 6 months later, Eliza Sterling stood in her new corner office overlooking Manhattan, smaller than the mansion she'd left behind, but entirely hers. The divorce had been finalized. The assets divided fairly. The custody arrangement put Sophie first, as it should be. Adrian had lost his position at Sterling and Associates when the board discovered the financial irregularities. Julian now ran the company alone, and it was thriving. Maya Durant had disappeared from New York, her reputation destroyed, her career over before it really began. And Eliza? Eliza had launched her own consultancy, using her maiden name, building something that was entirely hers, and she was brilliant at it. Sophie was thriving too, spending time with both parents, but seeing her mother truly happy for the first time in years. Sometimes, late at night, Eliza would think about that evening at the plaza. The emerald dress, the moment she descended those stairs and reclaimed her power, the moment she stopped being invisible. She never regretted it, not for a second, because here's what she learned. You teach people how to treat you, and for too long she'd taught Adrian that she would accept being diminished, being ignored, being betrayed. The moment she stopped teaching that lesson, everything changed. So here's my question for you. What lesson are you teaching the people in your life? Are you accepting treatment you don't deserve? Are you making yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable? Are you invisible in your own life? Because if Eliza Sterling taught us anything, it's this. You are not a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the main character of your own. And main characters don't stay silent. They don't accept betrayal. They don't let themselves be erased. They put on an emerald dress. They walk into that ballroom, and they remind everyone who they are. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or taken for granted, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me how you reclaimed your power. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, because I have more stories like this. Stories about people who refuse to be victims. Stories about justice. Stories about power reclaimed. This is just the beginning. Remember, the price of deception is always paid. The only question is who writes the bill. Eliza Sterling wrote hers, and everyone paid. What about you? Until next time, stay strong, stay powerful, and never, ever let anyone make you invisible.